Hello and welcome back for my next episode of Toy Box Tutorials. Before we begin, I want to apologize for my voice sounding a little bit weak. It's cold and rainy here today as I'm recording this, so it's something I have to deal with. And I also want to let you know that there will not be an episode next Friday because it'll be Good Friday. I will not have an opportunity to create or post a video that day. So the next episode of Toy Box Tutorials will be 2 weeks from today. And because of that, I'm going to do a little bit longer episode today and finish the pinball game that we've been working on. Now, one of the issues that I noted last time is that we have messages from the camera and messages from the remote controller that keep popping up and blocking our view during the pinball game. So today I want to address that, or at least part of it, by teaching you how to use the Toy Box Game Maker, and you'll find that in the Creativitoys drawer. I want to drop one right over here. You can use this toy to save your toy box as a toy box game, and you can set the rules for the editor, camera controls, required characters, and other features. And let me drop down a couple of buttons that we can use to play with this. I'll put these over here. Okay, now this is definitely an advanced toy because it is incredibly dangerous to use if you do not know what you are doing. You can inadvertently lock yourself out of your toy box with no way to save or edit it. So if you're the kind of person who skims through a tutorial video like this, don't. Make sure you watch the whole video, or at least the tutorial portion of it. So let's begin by looking at the properties, and there are a lot of them. Now the first batch of properties are settings for your toy box game, for your toy box, and these are all off by default, which means when this toy becomes active, it's basically going to cripple your toy box, all right? You will not be able to use any of the features here that are marked as off. So the editor mode will be disabled. Magic Wand is disabled. You can't change any logic connections. You cannot customize the toy styles or textures. You can't move a toy or delete a toy. You can't get out of the camera views. You can't use hexagonal power discs. You can't use the filters in the editor. All of these things are off by default. So when this toy becomes active, you're not going to be able to do any of that. And so if you want to be able to use any of these things in your toy box, you would change these and turn them on. So now when this toy becomes active, I can use the editor mode. I cannot use the Magic Wand or change logic connections. So this first flag is just the editor mode. This prevents the editor or the player from going into the editor mode during the game. And you might want this on if you are going to do a tower defense type of game where you're using the economy system and letting them purchase new defensive toys and place them. Otherwise, you may want this off. And again, this toy is really doesn't really have a lot of use since we can't share toy boxes anymore on the Toy Box server or on the Disney Infinity server because it doesn't exist. But if you're doing this on PC, or if you have a family with small kids and you're creating toy boxes that you don't want them messing up, this is where you would use this toy. So anyway, editor on and off, Magic Wand on and off, logic editing on and off, and of course you have to be able to get into the editor or the Magic Wand in order to be able to edit the logic, so just turning this on by itself isn't going to do you any good. This one is for customizing toys. This is for setting the style on terrain blocks and certain buildings and the customizable plants and so on. So that would be off by default, so the players can't do that. Toy moving, when it's disabled, you're not letting the player move any toys during the game. So if they could get into the editor, they would not be able to move or delete toys. So if you want the editor mode and you want them to be able to move existing toys, you would turn this on. If you want them to be able to delete existing toys, you would turn that on. All right. Custom camera canceling. This is off by default. So what this means is that when you have a camera view that you set up, so like an overhead view that you want to force them to use, or an isometric type of view, or if you're building cutscenes that you want them to watch, leaving this off means they cannot cancel out of those custom camera views. They're locked into those views. So if you want them to be able to cancel out of those views, you need to turn this on. All right. If you want them to be able to use hexagonal power disks, so adding vehicles, changing the potentially the sky or the terrain, you would need to turn this on. But this would mainly be for using blasters or vehicles for races or whatever. So you may want that on. And then editor filters. This lets them or prevents them from using the filters in the editor. And again, this isn't going to mean anything if editor mode is not on. So that's what those first settings do. So in a game like what we're building here, I would probably want perhaps to have hexagonal power disks on, and that's probably about it. I would want everything else off. And we're going to talk about this one here again in a little bit. All right, enemy difficulty. By default, this is set to the player's setting. So whatever difficulty setting the player has put in the game options is what's going to be used here. But you can override that and force them to have an easy battle or an extremely difficult battle. You can override their difficulty settings if you want for your particular toy box game and force them to use whatever you want. Generally not a good idea, but you could do that. And then you get down to these. And these settings basically allow you to require a particular character or set of characters for your game. This field here, the required character, and the rest of these flags are all mutually exclusive. And what that means is if you set this, these are going to all go away. So for example, by default it's set to any, so I can play with any character. But I can change it to a character type so that I can only allow flying characters, or only web swinging characters, or those with super jump, or wall crawling ability, or strength, or super strength, or maximum strength, only tech players, only marksmen, so like Hawkeye or Merida, only characters with a lightsaber, only force users, only villains. All right, so if I set that, for example, so that this toy box is only villains, you'll notice all the rest of those fields went away. And if I change this back to any, all those fields come back. All right. You can also set it by brand. So if I want to allow just Star Wars characters, or just Marvel, or just Disney and Pixar, I can do that. If I want to limit this by playset, so only characters from the specific playset will be allowed to play in this toy box. So if I want to limit it to just the Incredibles and Syndrome, I can do that. And you can do that based on playset. And it always exits all the way back out. I want to come back to this menu. You can also specify a specific character. So if I want this to only be a toy box specifically for Yoda, I can set that in here, and then only Yoda can play this toy box. So you can do that, and you can pick any character you want. And then the other option is property. So again, this is kind of like playset, but it's broken up a little bit more based on franchise. So Mickey and Friends, there is no Frozen playset, but if I want to allow only the Frozen characters in my game, just Elsa and Anna and Olaf, I can do that. If this is just for the Tron characters or Aladdin, I can do that. So you have a lot of flexibility here in creating a toy box specifically for a character or a group of characters. And then let's say that I do want to allow any character, I just don't want flying characters. Well, I can come down here and turn that off, and then any character except a flying character will work. Or if I want to limit it, so just any character except a web swinger or a wall crawler, I can set this and customize this any way I want and set whatever limitations that I want. And then only the characters that meet these criteria would be allowed to play. So those are all of the properties, and again, there's a lot of them, so hopefully that helps you understand what these are. Alright, so for this particular game, let's just leave all of this stuff off for right now and see what happens in a moment. Okay, we have logic connections, or specifically one trigger signal this will broadcast. It's called World Started, and this is broadcast when the Toy Box Game Maker is first started. Okay, so we're going to talk about those conditions here in a moment. And then there's two behaviors associated with this toy, and we're going to use these buttons to demo those. So new logic connection when pressed. We come over here, you'll see the logic menus available, and there's two things you can do. You can start test mode and you can end test mode. Okay, now this is incredibly dangerous because if you start test mode, you're activating this toy, and by default this toy is not active. Okay, so this basically makes the Toy Box Game Maker act like this toy box is now a toy box game. And depending on your settings in the properties, again, this may instantly lock you out of your toy box with no way to save or edit your toy box. So you want to have a button or something set up to be able to connect and end test mode, because if you can't end test mode, you're kind of screwed. Okay, so you set up your Toy Box Game Maker, and by default this is doing nothing again. So there's two ways to save your toy box and two ways to activate and make this toy work. The first way is to save it as a toy box game, and let me get out of the editor here. So if we go into the save menu, normally you would do a new save and they would save a new toy box game, but if you do that with the Toy Box Game Maker, right now it's not connected up for anything to activate test mode or do anything. The Toy Box Game Maker is there, but nothing's going to happen with it. What you have to do is press R on my Wii U controller, or R1 or some other thing to go to Toy Box Games. And now this is a different menu. Okay? And so we have, this is something I downloaded off the Disney Infinity servers, I think. Not sure where that came from. But if you save this as a new Toy Box game, it's going to show up in this menu, not this menu. All right? And what this means is when you load this Toy Box game, the Toy Box Game Maker will be automatically activated when the toy box is loaded. And there is no way to turn it off. All right, so you only want to do this when you are absolutely sure you are done with your toy box. All right, the other way to do this, we back out of this, I haven't saved anything, is to hook up a couple of buttons or other controls and use test mode. And this is the way I would recommend using this right now, because again, there's really not much advantage to doing toy box game and saving it as a toy box game, because you can't really share toy box files anyway, at least on the consoles. So we'll hook this button up to do a new logic connection when pressed, and let me actually I think maybe the better thing to do, let me put out a level starter. This would be the ideal way to do this, so let me demo this for you. Wasn't prepared to do this, but I just thought of it. This is the best way, the recommended way to do that. Alright, so we will hook up a button to do a new logic connection when pressed. We'll connect up to our level starter and start that. and we need this because we're in the toy box, all right? And if we just hook up the level starter, nothing's going to happen until we exit out of the toy box and reload it. But on the level starter, we'll do a new logic connection on catalyze. We'll come over here and start test mode, okay? And then again, we need a way to turn that off. So this button will do a new logic connection when pressed, and we will end test mode. So now if we save our toy box and reload it, when it's done loading, the level starter will invoke, and that will turn this on. All right? And since I don't want to take the time to do that, that's why we have this other button. Okay, so here we go. All right, so now that toy is active. And if I try to get into the editor, you'll notice it's not letting me. If I bring up tools, the magic wand is not there. So I cannot get into that. And so all of the settings that are on this are now active. And if you did not provide a way to turn off test mode, you're screwed at this point because you cannot edit this toy box anymore. But fortunately, we hooked up that button. So now that we've done that, now we can get back into the editor. Okay. So if we had this, for example, set up to allow a specific character other than Sorcerer's Apprentice Mickey, as soon as we activated that, it would have told us that we need to put a different character on the base, whatever character we picked. And so that's important. So this is very helpful for testing this out while you still need to build your level. And what I would recommend is doing it this way anyway, and then you can stash this button out of the way somewhere where only you can find it if you need to come in here, and you can let your kids loose on this, and they can come in here and they won't accidentally mess up your toy box. So that's very handy. Now the whole reason I'm showing you this toy though is to fix our problem with the camera view. So the camera automatically puts these little messages on top of your view that tells you that tells you how to cancel it. So by leaving this off, when the Toy Box Game Maker is active, you will not be able to get out of that mode, and so the camera will not bother showing you that message. So that's really good. The other message, though, that we were seeing comes from the remote controller, and this tells you how to get out of that mode. And unfortunately, I have not found a way to turn that message off. So if you know how to do that, leave a comment and let me know, because I have not been able to figure that out. All right, so that's the Toy Box Game Maker and how you use it. And so now we don't have any toys left to cover, any new toys left that I need to teach you how to use. We know everything we need to know to finish off this toy box game, this pinball game. And because there won't be an episode next week, let's go ahead and finish this. So to do that, we're going to need a few extra toys. So I have set up, or I'm going to set up, let's do it this way. We're going to use this kiln pressure plate. And I'm going to put this down over here on this little side route. And we're going to place another one up here on this little upper route. Okay? And unfortunately, a physics ball rolling over that will not activate the toy. And because of that, that's why I have a trigger area set up here for each one. Okay? And so what's going to happen is when the ball comes through here, I want to open up this path, which means we're going to need to close this path off. So then this path becomes active, and then when the ball comes through here, we'll set off the fireworks and award the players a super high point bonus for getting the ball up there. And so you can set up little paths and things in your toy box world, and that's what I want to do. So since we're going to block this off, we're going to need a path and a terrain block to do that. So let's go over here and grab our path tool. And actually, before we do that, let's add in our terrain. And I'm going to line this up. I'd like this block to sit down in here like this and close off that area. Alright, so we'll put this out here like this. Then we'll go back to the Creativitoys drawer. Now we know where that block has to sit. We can drop our path. So we're going to put it right underneath the block on the ground like this. And we're going to drop this down 3 notches. That should be far enough. And we'll exit. Okay, so there is our path. I'll come back to that in a moment. In addition to that, I've dropped a locator down here. Right there. We have a logic gate, an effects generator, a time delayer, a party cannon, and another effects generator with another locator down here. So we're going to slide this actually over. Okay, so these are the toys that we're going to use to build this little route. So for the side route over here, we'll go to the trigger area. And let me pull up my diagram here. Okay, so we're going to do a new logic connection when entered by physics ball. So we're simulating the ball rolling over that pressure plate. We're going to do 3 things. Okay, first thing I want to do is come over to the effects generator, and we are going to play once the spinning star. And we'll connect this effects generator up to that locator down there. That's where we want the effect to be. Just to give the player some visual feedback that something happened. Alright, on the trigger area, new logic connection when entered by physics ball. We're going to go to the sound effects over here that we put in an earlier video. We're going to go to General, and we're going to scroll down to Computer Bleeping Blooping. That's the sound I want to play. And then on the trigger area, new logic connection when entered by a physics ball. We're going to go to this logic gate and input. And we're using the logic gate because I don't want this to happen every time the player comes through here. Okay. For example, if this is already open, we don't need to reopen it. And so that's why we're using this. I don't care if the spinning star goes off or the sound effect plays. We just don't want to reset that block and play it if it's already open. All right. So on the challenge maker, we'll do a new logic connection on invites accepted. We'll make sure this logic gate is open. And then the player's playing, the ball comes through here. We'll play our visual effect, we'll play our sound effect, we'll input into this gate. Okay. And then on the gate, a new logic connection on output. We'll go to our time delayer and start the delay. And this is set to 1 second by default, so we'll just leave it at that. Okay. Now let's go ahead and work on this part of it. So on the path creator, we'll go to the properties, and we're going to leave that on. I'm going to set the speed to 20. I want this to be a dramatic opening. Auto start is off. The rest of those properties are fine. And then we will go ahead and attach this to its locator first before we attach that block. I think that might be better, because it'll be harder to select once that block's in place. Okay, then the block, a new path connection. Connect that up to the toy box path, and there we go. And then on the block, we'll open the properties for that, go into toy box path, and all of these properties are fine, but we want to change the movement style to one way and stop. All right. So now back to the time delayer. We'll do a new logic connection. When the delay is completed, we want to do two things. We want to come over to our path, and we want to do a reset and play. So that'll start that block moving underneath the playing field and opening up that path. And the other thing we'll do is do a little visual effect for it. So we'll do a new logic connection on the time delayer. When the delay is completed, come over to our effects generator over here. And for this, we're going to play looped out of the bursts category. We're going to play dirt debris. And so that's going to keep looping and keep doing that until we get down to the end of this. All right? And so on the path, we're going to do a new logic connection when reset and played. So basically when it reaches the end of the path, we're going to do two things. We're going to come up here and stop looping these effects. All right. And the other thing we will do on the path, a new logic connection when reset and played. We'll come over to our logic gate and close it. And so then the player will not be able to reopen it again. It's already open. So I don't want the block to snap back up here and start going underneath the terrain again if the ball happens to come down that side path. Okay. So then once that side path is open, then the ball could get up here. And so again, the pressure plate is there for a visual indicator to the player that there's something there, but since it doesn't register the ball rolling over it, we need this trigger area. So the trigger area will do several things. New logic connection when entered by physics ball. We're going to come to our party cannon and do a grand finale, so we want to celebrate. We also want to do a new logic connection when entered by a physics ball. We'll come over to our sound effect generator, and under the musical category, we're going to do the Royal Fanfare. On the trigger area here, a new logic connection when entered by a physics ball. We want to boost their score, so we will come over to our scoreboard, and we will increment by 100 the score for player 1. So they're going to get a nice score boost for doing that. So just instead of keeping the ball just in the playing field, you've now given them a secondary objective to try to get the ball over here to open up this route and then try to get the ball up through here so they can score some big points. So now you've turned your pinball game into just, instead of a defensive game, you've given them some objectives, and that just makes it much more engaging and much more fun. So I think that's really good. Okay. And then once the game is over, we want to put that block back. So on the challenge maker, a new logic connection when the game is ended. I want to come over to our path creator and do a reset and stop. And that'll put the block back and reset for the next game. And the fact that this is closed doesn't matter, because as soon as we start a new game, the logic connection we made, we'll reopen that. Okay, so I think that's pretty good. So let's go ahead and activate this. So our Toy Box Game Maker is now active. And let's play some pinball again. Alright, so we got 3 balls to work with. And we're going to use that. That puts us into this mode, and you'll notice that message is from the Toy Box Game Maker. But the camera messages are no longer there. That one, however, keeps popping up. So again, if you know a way to turn that off, that would be much appreciated. But let's go ahead and drop our ball and see what we can do. Ah, there it goes. Okay, so there goes our path is opening up. Ah, lost our first ball. There goes our next one. Alright, so it looks like we got a problem with the looping effects there. We'll have to look at that. See if we can get the ball up there, though. Ah. It seems like I had a problem with those looping effects before, too. This is pretty fun to play, I have to say. Just wish that message wasn't getting in the way. Alright, so that's already opened, so that doesn't really do anything, but that's alright. And there it goes again. And we're doing pretty good, even though we can't quite get that thing up there. Ah, almost. If I can hit that just right. Oh, almost. So yeah, this adds quite a bit of strategy to this. Ah, there we go. So last ball. Oh, man. Oh, well. Didn't get a chance to get it up there that time. But yeah, we got to do something with that effect generator over there. So another option that you could do is come down to the path point at the bottom. Well, except that we got to turn off our thing. I'm actually shocked I got into the editor and into Spark mode. I have to look at those connections here in a moment. Okay, so on this we do a new logic connection when the point is reached by the object on the path. We can come up here and stop looping the effects. You can also have the challenge maker do that too, by the way. And if you want to do that, new logic connection on the challenge maker when the game is ended. Have it stop looping the effects. It shouldn't be needed, but just in case the player cancels out of the game and ends the game before that has a chance to go through. And now if we look at this, yeah, that should not have allowed me to get into the editor. I'm actually shocked that it did that. That normally should not happen. So I'll have to look at that, but might be because I haven't saved my game. But I was going to close out my video here, but that flashing in the background is really annoying. Let me go ahead and turn that thing off because that's annoying. Stop looping effects. There we go. That's a little better. Alright, so that's it for our first pinball game. It's a fairly standard pinball game, and it's a little more fun than the basic pinball template. In our next episode, which will air 2 weeks from now, we'll begin working on another pinball game, and this one will be very different. It's going to be a unique kind of game that can only exist in the toy box, so I think you're going to like it. But thanks for watching my video today. Before you go, leave a comment and let me know what you think of the tutorial and the completed pinball game. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet and you like Disney Infinity, be sure to click my photo in the lower right corner of the video. That's all for me today. Have a great weekend.